Well, today we call this Washington in Milwaukee, which is really fun. I'm here with Marissa Dineen, and she is the vintner and owner of Dineen Vineyards in Yakima Valley. And that's, of course, in Washington. How are you?
I'm doing great. A little chilly, though, Ray.
Yeah, we couldn't quite make the weather great for you. I'm sorry. I apologize. Tell me about where the connection is for.
Yes, absolutely. So my father grew up on a farm here in Wisconsin, just outside of Milwaukee in the town of Cedarburg. And too many early mornings, cold mornings, as we were just talking about, and smelly cows. And so he escaped and joined the service, and then eventually joined banking, and was doing that in Washington, and then wanted to get back into agriculture. And here we are.
Wow. How many years ago was that?
Got 25. 26 will be our 25th leaf.
Wow. 25th leaf. I've never heard anybody refer to it that way.
Oh, really?
No, I
yeah.
haven't.
So every year, grapevines are a perennial plant, and so we get leaves starting in the spring every year. So we celebrate that.
We had met originally at the auction in Washington, which was back in August, and you had mentioned you were going to be in town, and here you are, so we could do a full-length interview. So welcome to Milwaukee, and welcome back to Wisconsin.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's good. It's and we're in downtown Milwaukee, in the building where my old studio was, where Life Between the Vines came to life. So lots to talk about, but I want to talk about your location specifically. You are in the Yakima Valley in Washington. So Yakima Valley is just a little bit north of the Oregon state line. Is that correct?
Correct. Right smack dab in the middle of the state.
Okay, so it's okay. So tell me a little bit about Yakima Valley. What sets it off? What makes it different?
Well, we are the largest AVA, American Viticulture area in Washington, and Dineen Vineyards is actually in a sub-AVA called the Rattlesnake Hills, which we call the Hills. Because it's such a large AVA, it's actually pretty different. So we range from about 400 above sea level up to our AVA, which starts at 850. Dineen Vineyards were at 1,200 above sea level,
You're
so
up there.
pretty different. And then it spans a lot of different soils, quite frankly. So the Missoula floods, which you probably heard about in Washington quite a bit, that covers, gosh, I don't even know the percentage, but probably 90% of the grape growing areas in Washington. We're actually above the floods. So we're part of an even more ancient geological formation called the Ellensburg Formation. And that means our soils are totally different in Dineen Vineyards and the surrounding area than they are in other areas of the Yakima Valley. So I know you went to Red Mountain, for example. Very different. They're part of Columbia, part of the Missoula floods.
And that's more like the Columbia Valley, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. You guys grow just about anything there.
We do. And we have 13 different varieties across our 3 vineyard sites, almost exclusively Bordeaux and Rhone varieties. We're pretty classic. We aren't, Washington, we can grow most things, but we keep really to the classics. And that's our mantra, do the classics well.
So what is your role at the winery?
Oh my goodness. How long do you have?
What isn't your role?
So I would say my role is I really oversee our strategy and where we want to go next, both in terms of growth of wine sales, but also in quality and wine style. And I work very closely with our winemaker, Brian Mackey, to determine that. And also very closely with our vineyard manager, Patrick Ron, to make sure that we keep quality up in the vineyard as well.
Are you out there getting your hands dirty in the vineyard during harvest at all? Do you have that chance, or is that?
Well, actually, it's funny you say that. So I have, because we do our Syrah. We do it in the style of the Northern Rhone with a little Viognier co-ferment. And oftentimes the crews are so busy at harvest that you just have to go out there and pick a few lugs of Viognier to toss in the vat. And I've done it.
Good for you.
So yeah, it's fun and it's hard work, and that gives you an appreciation for the crew. They're so talented, and really because they do this year in, year out, they know their stuff.
Let's talk about the wines that you make. You've talked about primarily Bordeaux and Rhone, but let's just walk through a few of them. Obviously, Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yes, Cabernet Sauvignon. And, in Washington, I think we can get beautifully ripe Cabernet Sauvignon that does have a lot of those varietal characteristics. You can, in the winery, get those really big, bold wines, but you can also get a lot more restraint and elegance. So I always like to tell people we lie on the continuum of wine from old world to new world, sometimes closer to old world, just in terms of the delicacy and the finesse that we can get.
What makes Washington wine special?
What makes Washington wine? Well, I think it's difference, I think it's quality, and I think it's story. So those three things. So we have a lot of latitude in Washington. We're not constrained by some of these rules that you have in Europe, for example, about what we can grow. So we can do a lot of different things. Our winemaking styles are evolving and newer. So we really have only been at it, in serious numbers in Washington for about 40 years. So we can experiment and continue to experiment. So that's fun. And then the last part was quality, is I think we have a climate and soils that are so conducive to growing premium wine grapes that it's really hard to match.
So what about your wine journey? I mean, you grew up in this family that there's wine in the family, but I mean, was this the direction you wanted to go as you grew up, as you got older? Was it somewhere else you wanted to go? You grew up in Seattle, you said.
Yeah, I grew up in Seattle. This was not on my radar at all. So I was fortunate because I grew up in a family where, we eat dinner together every single night. And my parents were food lovers and wine lovers and, quite frankly, community lovers. And so we would always have a nice meal. My parents would have wine, so it was part of our family culture. And so, that was just part of life for me. I didn't really think of it as, something separate or even something to go into business-wise. So I actually followed my dad's footsteps in financial services. So, and that was exciting. That took me from Washington after I got my business degree. I went to the New York area. I worked in financial services there. I ultimately went to London as well. And that was wonderful because, gosh, I got so exposed to all the major wine regions of the old world.
Yeah.
So, I was in Italy. I was in France a lot. I was in Spain. I was even in some lesser known areas such as Hungary and Greece. And then you just realize, gosh, there are wonderful wines from everywhere, every corner of this continent. And so that was really a fun thing for me to explore. And also just to see some of the grand chateau in Bordeaux. Also, go stand at the gates of Romani Conti and Burgundy. So these are kind of formative experiences.
You're killing me.
And I still actually didn't think I was going to go into wine here, Ray. And I would say because I did work in financial services prior to the crisis, I was lucky because expense accounts were in good shape at that point. So I had a lot of exposure, and I was able at a younger age to really understand the differences in wines and the grades of wines too. So very high quality wine versus middle versus lesser quality. And I think that's been helpful as I've taken on this role with our family. My parents got into it. So, I talked about returning to agriculture for my dad, and my mom loved that too, as, a great home cook. And I was enchanted because it's fun to go to the vineyard. It's fun to see how things are developing, and especially when it's newer. So, we keep planting, buildings were going up, and you're learning about the process behind the veil. It's like the Wizard of Oz, right? You go back and you see how they're pulling everything. And that was fun. And so I did that often when I would get home to visit. And then the financial crisis happened. That was no fun. No fun to be in financial services. No expense accounts any longer. And so I started thinking, what am I going to do next? The other thing my parents really instilled in me is being a lifelong learner. And so my father, when he decided to do the vineyard, had gone down to UC Davis and did their program there, which is excellent. And then he was involved in establishing the Wine Science Center in Washington State, which we're so very lucky to have what I would call a world-class wine research and teaching institute. And so post-financial crisis, I had the opportunity to actually go and take courses at the Wine Science Center. They have a distance learning program, so you can literally be anywhere in the world. And I did that by web, and then I was able to go back to Washington to do the labs, and that's how I got the hard skills and the knowledge for a lot of the technical pieces that we do.
For the tasting room, do people need to make appointments, or can they just walk on in? How's it work?
We prefer appointments so that you can have the best possible service, but we are always hospitable.
Excellent. And for our listeners who would like to learn more about Dineen Vineyards in Yakima Valley, what is your website?
It's www.dineenvineyards.com.
Excellent. Well, once again, I hope you enjoy your time here in Milwaukee and in Wisconsin. And this was really fun to reconnect with you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ray. Super fun. Appreciate it.